He's back. He's angry. He's Hans Niemann. Now, if I was Hans, I would be pretty unhappy about the fact that in the last 7 months, my career has just gone down the pan since Magnus Carlsen withdrew from the Sinkfield Cup. Because Hans Niemann was going to get invited to Tata Steel in January this year. He was going to a load of online events. He was going to play at the Chess.com Global Championship, but everything's gone out the window. And so we haven't seen him playing chess in 3 months. But now he's back at the board, playing in the Menorca Open, and this is the thing now, he's just playing the Open circuit, right? Other strong GMs, yes, Gukesh D's playing, for example, another 2700 GM, but it's not in the same circles where the real money's at when you get the invitations for the top players. So let's see how he can use this anger to fuel his performance. Now, this game today, he's playing a Ukrainian GM. It's round 6. Yuri Solodovnichenko, I think I'm saying that correctly. Now, that guy's rated about 2500, so weaker than Hans. Hans the favourite on paper, but this is a wild game of chess. Let's see what happens. So Yuri with white, Hans with black. By the way, the reason I don't have the names here and I'm recording this in Lee Chess, I'll show you soon because some weird stuff happened with the DGT board, the transition of the moves, quite funny really. So we get this Sicilian on the board, Hans is playing black. Now we get this 4 knights variation of the open Sicilian and Hans opts for this d6 move. Now bishop g5, main move, and here Hans, he takes it down a sideline because the main move is e6, the Scandinavian pawn structure, but Hans goes bishop to d7, and now white also plays a rare sideline by taking the knight immediately. Most common there is queen d2. Now, grandmasters, they're not going to give up their bishops unless they've got something in mind. What's that something in mind? Well, you've shattered the pawn structure and now the knight immediately lands on f5. And Yuri's actually got 4 games already in the database from this position, going way back to 2009. So he knows his stuff around this variation. Now, the knight wasn't captured. I mean, if you do that, it is possible. But of course, you give white this open e-file. There could be pressure on this backwards pawn. Definitely a small edge for white. Instead, Hans plays a very unusual idea because the main move here is queen a5 or doing something to activate the queen. But Hans goes pawn to h5 and this is such a hard move to understand. I mean, there are no games in the database. I mean, on the one hand, it makes some sense. You're not going to be castling this side, so you're looking to activate the rook, but I'm not sure why Hans did it in this order and didn't first start developing this queen side here, which he now goes on to do. So we see bishop b5, queen c7 now played, and this knight hits d5. Now, the queen drops back and the knight drops back, and this is tantamount to a draw offer here from the weaker rated opponent. But Hans doesn't oblige, he's 200 points rated more, he wants to win. So he goes pawn a6, kicks this bishop, it chops the knight, giving up yet another piece. Why is white doing this? Well, again, it's all about gaining time, rapid development, and white does have the centre here with this strong central pawn. So e6 kicks this knight, it drops into d4. Hans nudges back the bishop, and now white uses this lead in development to really go after Hans with pawn to f4. Queen c7 and now pawn f5, and this is a really great moment to pause and think about the position here because there's a terrible move for black. If you were to go pawn e5 in response to this, it'd be a really bad move because you just gave up the d5 square for this monster knight. And this bishop looks awful. This is not a nice pawn structure. Plus, this is going to be a backwards pawn for the rest of the game. So, of course, Hans doesn't do this. He just castles the king. White does the same. King b8. And now rook h to f1 puts pressure on this pawn. And so there's a threat to take here, win a pawn. So Hans covers that one. We see rook f3 played. Hans nudges back to c8. Opens the eyes of this rook. And now rook g3 played, and it's a bit inaccurate from white, running back just one move. Already the best move for white here is to go pawn h3, and we'll see why in a moment. Instead, rook g3, Hans now goes pawn h4, rook g4 played. By the way, if you invade g7, well then there's bishop f8, you just kick the rook out of there, and then the queen defends this pawn. And now Hans, he could go d5 already, which we see in the game. But he starts with bishop f8, gives white one more chance to play pawn h3. It isn't done. Instead, the rook comes to e1, and now Hans strikes with d5. Absolutely correct. Mobilizing his central pawns, fighting against white's space, and also opening up the queen to attack this unprotected pawn. This is the problem with the white pawn center. Now, this is the kind of funny part, right? Because here, the moves go absolutely haywire. If you look this game up on Lichess or chess.com, I'm going to quickly flick to this separate board. Well, in this position here, it's got rook d1 being played, and then the pawn takes here, and white apparently takes here, leaving an entire rook on pre. Hans doesn't take the rook, he lifts his into the game. Now white sacks an entire knight, you can just win a piece there. But instead the pawn is captured here, rook f1, and now Hans takes on g2. I spent like half an hour trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Have these guys gone nuts or what? The queen can be taken. Oh wait, white doesn't take the queen. What is going on? Anyway, it's just because there was issues transmitting the moves. So I dug the game out from the 2700chess.com site. These are the actual moves. So what white actually did was take on d5, not nudge the rook over. Now we see captures here from Hans, hitting the rook, and the pawn is captured by the knight, and Hans now, he could take this one immediately, but instead he goes rook to h5, hits this knight, and then after it's defended, he picks up this pawn, and he's now better. He's a pawn ahead, is he? I've counted right? No, material's level, but okay, Hans has got the pressure here. And now this rook is in the line of this bishop, so white saves it by nudging over, but by doing this, you now leave a second pawn to be taken, and Hans simply snaps it off. Now he is a pawn ahead. We see knight takes on h4. Okay, material restored. Queen g5, the knight comes back to f5, and now after Hans hits the e-file, here white makes a decisive mistake, because the best move to play is pawn d6, and it's still quite an interesting game. But what we see played instead was this knight nudging back to g3, and although it makes quite some sense to open the rooks on this pawn, actually there's a tactical problem, and if you want to pause and look for it, then please do so. So the way that black can take advantage of this is with rook to h3. That knight is pinned to the queen, and how do you actually defend against this threat? You can't move this one back because it's pinned. Now white's regretting not playing king b1 earlier. Always play king b1, right? If you lift this one up lift this one up the board, then you can take anyway. Rook recaptures, and you take here with check. And after, say, the king moves to b1, well, now there's rook e1 check, and the whole house is collapsing. If knight d1, you can take, queen's overloaded, you pick up the rook, other good continuations. So there isn't actually a good way to defend this knight. White goes for knight to e4, but now there's this problem. Rook captures. This knight can't take back because it's pinned to the queen. So the queen takes, and now the knight drops. And the problem here is that after king b1, finally, but it's too late, we get bishop d6, and look at this monster bishop pair, just killing those rooks. So rook 4 to f2 played. Now pawn f5, Hans gets those ones rolling. Queen e8, queen e3, and now the queen captured, this one took back, and it's a nice transition from Hans into a domination of an endgame, because rook g2 tries to activate, but you can't actually get at these pawns, and this one's really well blockaded. f4 played, now rook g8, king c7, rook g7 attacks the pawn, Hans covers the threat, and now king c1 was met by bishop e5, centralizing, hitting the rook, rook g8, and this bishop activates. Look at that pair of bishops in the center of the board. We see king d2, and now this pawn wasn't captured because otherwise white can take here. You've left the defense, you attack this one, not ideal. So instead, the bishop centralized once more. Pawn c4 played, bishop e3 check, king c3, king d6, and pawn b4. And it's absolutely the right policy from white here. Get the 4 on 2 rolling, try and create a passed pawn, generate counterplay. King e5 from Hans, rook d8 played, coming behind that pawn. And now after b6, we see a4, king e4, a5, trying to get Hans to capture here, then get the c-pawn rolling at the right moment. Hans goes pawn f3, and here we see resignation from white. And for me, this was really a premature resignation, because although white's better, you can still black's better, you can still generate play here. You know, d6 is the top engine move. This is the top line. The rook's now challenging. This check comes in. King f4, but after takes here, you know, you can actually generate these running past pawns. Bishop d8, only move apparently to keep advantage. King d4, and then this is just a sample line. You know, you have to actually stop this king invading. Bishop e6 is a good move, for example, because say you come in here and try and run this one down, well, white is now apparently winning with king to e5. So definitely still some play in this game. I'm surprised that white resigned so early. So Hans is back. He's fighting hard. He wants to get back in the elite circles. It'll be fascinating to see how this year pans out. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again on a future video.